All right. Thank you, everybody, for logging in. We see people from all over the country and all over the world, Australia and Scotland and Oregon and Washington and Texas. I'm Gustavo Tolosa, the webinar host for Dr. McDougall, and I'm in Dallas, Texas. And as usual, I'm very happy to see all of you logging in. And today we have a guest because Dr. McDougall just could not make it, and he's really sorry that he cannot be here today. But we have a wonderful guest that all of you enjoy. So I'm sure we'll have no complaints. And Dr. McDougall will be back next week when he will do the webinar on arthritis. And so make sure you go back to the website later on today. We will have the page ready to sign up. And I just want to say a few words for those of you who are new to the webinar about Dr. Doug Lisle, who is our guest today. And he is the psychologist for the McDougall Wellness Program and the director of research for True North Health Center. And Dr. Lisle has lectured at Stanford, Cornell, and other universities, and he is the co-author of this wonderful book, The Pleasure Trap: Mastering the Hidden Force That Undermines Health and Happiness. And he is also the founder of Esteem Dynamics. I really encourage you all to visit that website. It's esteemdynamics.org, and I will type it here in the chat area. And Dr. Lisle has a website where you can get more information about these ideas, and you can watch other videos that he has. And also, for people who might be interested in making a phone consultation with Dr. Lisle, you can go there for more information. And again, it is esteemdynamics.org. So I want to welcome today Dr. Doug Lisle. How are you doing today from California?
Great to see you again.
Very good.
As always.
As always. We always have fun in our hour together here at the webinars, don't we?
Sure.
So today, what we will do, since we hadn't planned on it, but Dr. Lisle was so kind to just jump in and fill in for today, we will have all of you just type questions here in the chat box, and hopefully we will get to all of them or most of them. And I'm just going to start with one generic question, Dr. Lisle, because there's something that I hear quite often, if not all the time. People that say that they are following the way of eating that Dr. McDougall talks about, and that you also, and that True North does as well. You know, a plant-based way of eating with no added fats and with enough starches to keep us fulfilled. And so they say that they follow it, and they still either can't lose the last few pounds or can't lose weight. So is it possible to follow a plant-based diet but be eating foods that are still rich in calories and fat, like maybe too much bread or pastas, or maybe a lot of nuts, or maybe even sugar? Or what could it be that would be preventing some of these people to hit a plateau? Although I know that you don't use that word, and maybe you can talk about that as well. Okay,
go ahead. People get very frustrated for a number of reasons, but let me talk about one of the most common things that happens. Let's suppose someone begins the McDougall program and they are 40 or 50 pounds overweight or 60 pounds overweight. And so as a result, the reason why they're overweight is that they've been eating a diet that's far too rich. So they then move to a starch-centered diet. They reduce the fat of their diet probably from 40% down to maybe 20% or 15%. And their diet is much healthier. And what will very often happen is they'll lose 1 to 2 pounds a week. And so they may lose, 5 pounds a month or even 10 pounds a month in some cases. So 3 or 4 months goes by, or maybe 5 or 6 months goes by, and the person's down 35 or 40 pounds. And so it's sailing along, and then it stops. And so they're still 20 or 25 pounds overweight, but things have stopped dead in their tracks. And now they're frustrated because they sort of expected things to just continue on. Now, what's happening is that dependent upon just a few factors. Number one, your genetics. Number two, the richness of your diet. Number three, your exercise level. Those three things essentially triangulate to hit what I'm going to call an equilibrium. So what other people in the world will call, other diet, experts or whatever, will call a plateau. I will say that this is a misunderstanding. The people believe that a plateau is some mysterious process that comes up and gets you. It isn't. That isn't what's taking place here. What there is there's essentially a mathematical equilibrium between your exercise level, your genetics, and the richness of your diet. And so if your exercise level remains the same, your genetics definitely remain the same, and your food changes, then you are going to have your weight change up until a certain point, until you reach a biological equilibrium. And so in this case, for example, let's suppose that you're eating starch-centered diet, doing a really good job, maybe not perfect, but you're doing things 90% well, and you're having some bread and some pasta, but not too much, and a few nuts, but not too much, and everything is going well. What's happening is you've gone from a very rich diet to a much less rich diet, and as a result, your equilibrium point for your weight is much lower, and your body starts heading there, and it's going to head there, and when it hits that equilibrium, it's going to stop. Okay, so for example, let's suppose that you are naturally a curvy female. You're a little bit naturally on the thick side genetically. You were eating a rich diet and you were 60 pounds overweight. Now you're not eating such a rich diet. You're eating a good McDougall diet, and it's 4 or 5 months later, and now you're 20 pounds overweight or 25 pounds overweight, but it stops. Okay, so now what we have is we have three variables still left in the equation. The genes have not changed. Same genetic problem. We've got two problems left, though. We've got the exercise level and also the richness of the diet. And so now what happens is if a person tightens up their diet a little bit from there, they might do that, and they may go a couple of weeks and they don't see any change, and they say it doesn't make any difference. But it does. What you're now seeing is the difference between a good diet and a great diet is very subtle. And the weight loss is going to be very subtle. It's not going to come off at 4 or 5 pounds a month. It may come off at 1 pound a month, because you're almost perfect on the previous diet, but not quite. So now what we have to do to keep people inspired is they actually have to be more savvy about the math that underlies this issue. So if you've hit, quote, a plateau, what we have to do is we have to make changes that are essentially taking care of the last mile on this program. So we're going to do less dried fruit. We're going to do a little bit less nuts. We're going to do a little less processed foods. So as we do that, as we move to a one-notch leaner diet, we would expect that the weight loss, which might have been 6 pounds a month before, now turns into 1 pound a month. Well, in order to measure 1 pound a month, you are going to have to be careful about how you measure. So what I tell people to do is I tell them to measure themselves, say, 3 days in a row at the beginning of a month, and take the average. And then we're going to do that same thing a month from now, and we're going to see if that average is a pound less. If it's about the same, we still stay the course and we go another month. At the end of 2 months, we may find that we're now down 2 pounds, that we didn't actually even pick it up after a month. Now, a pound in a month is no small feat, folks. It's 4,000 calories that you've shedded over 30 days. So that means you have systematically undereaten by 130 calories a day, and you weren't trying to push yourself away from the table. The body simply shed it. And so what will very often happen when you're getting down to that last 10 or 15% of body weight, if you're a naturally thicker person, you're going to have to be very tight, and the response of the body is going to be relatively slow. I've seen a person, for example, that I kept very, very close records on, that a woman that got down to maybe 5% over what she really wanted to be at. And that we could see that it was appropriate, that she had another 10 pounds to lose. She was completely fastidious for the first week and lost nothing according to the scale, and was really irritated at me. And I said, trust me, you are now, the change of your diet from where you were to where you are now is very small, and the shedding of calories is going to be very slight. She went a second week and still had nothing, and by that time, she was contemplating Dr. Doug murder. She was feeling demoralized. I said, we still can't tell. It was at the end of the third week that she was down a pound, and at the end of the fourth week, she was down 2 pounds. So we finally were able to detect this, very confidently after 4 weeks. We could see that she had shed 2 pounds, and she only had about 10 pounds to shed. So to take those 2 pounds down in a month was actually once again inspiring, and she went on her way all the way down. So this is, but it takes time. So this is important for people to realize, that the weight loss early when you're overweight is very fast. Later, when you make changes that are subtle, you can expect the weight loss change to be subtle.
Right, right. Thank you for saying that. I know we've covered this before, but it's just it's a very common
Yes.
question. So one of our viewers has a question about the whole food, plant-based way of eating, if it affects depression, and how.
I don't know that it does. I think that what winds up impacting a person's depression is caused by, essentially, it's caused by indications that we're not doing as well in the world in some arenas as we would hope. That's actually, and that we hope and expect. So if you are a B student in chemistry at the junior college and you study very hard for the final and you get a C, you're depressed. If you study very hard for the final and get an A, you're really excited. And if you study really hard and get a B, you're neither depressed or excited. You're relieved that it's over. But there's no negative tone, nor particularly positive tone to that situation. So essentially, your mood states are feedback as to whether or not we are above what we expect or below what we expect. And our expectations are naturally derived from a lot of data that we sort through in our lives. So Michael Jordan, when he went out on the floor, he expected to get 25 points a game, and he expected to make a bunch of big plays, and he expected to probably win. Somebody else that wasn't as talented wouldn't expect any of those things. And if those things happened, they would have been elated. So essentially, our mood states are relative to our expectations, and our expectations are sort of very carefully orchestrated calculations that our mind does to expect of us what is reasonable. So when people are depressed, it's because some arena of their life, usually one of 3 major arenas. It's usually the romantic arena, it's friendship arena, or it's commerce. It could also be things in family. It could also, though, be something else, which would be your health. So it turns out that if you are getting a lot of negative feedback that you are not very healthy and not feeling very good, then if you change to a healthier diet and you start to get evidence that you are improving, then you can have a huge improvement in your mood. So this is what we have seen very often in the McDougall program. People will come in sort of depressed, a little bit hopeful, kind of demoralized in the 10-day program. And then by the end of the 10-day program, they're ecstatic and they're very excited. And that's because they have gotten control of such a major portion of life in a way that they didn't really think that they could. So in that way, this can help depression. But usually when people ask that question, the underlying question is my depression being caused by some mysterious chemical imbalance in my brain that somehow the diet will then put in the right fuel and I'll no longer be depressed? No, that is not how depression works, and it's not how your mood states and your mood changes work. And so it's important to realize that that this is worth doing, and the benefits are more likely to be indirect, not a direct chemical change.
All right.
Incidentally, the medications for depression don't do that job either.
Right.
Yes.
Would you say that getting enough sun would that might help, or no?
It depends upon the individual. So in other words, there are individuals, if there's a sun deficiency, that's a problem. It's not a real serious issue, but it is a huge issue for some people. So essentially, you want probably the main deficiency that exists with respect to depression is actually exercise. And I believe I've got my own theories about why this is true. The evidence is clear on this measure. I believe that the following is the chain of events that how this works naturally in terms of the natural biology. In nature, if you are getting failure feedback in some area of life, what the system tells you is quit doing what you're doing. It's not working. You are wasting your energy. Picture, for example, a young man who keeps knocking on doors for looking for a job with the Wall Street Journal under his arm, and he's in flip-flops. And he says, I read the Wall Street Journal every day. You know, I just want to, I'm looking for a job somewhere in your marketing department. And he keeps getting turned down and laughed at. Well, by the 100th time, we would hope that he would have depression. In fact, we would hope he would have depression after 15 times or less. And the reason is that the failure feedback should cause him to be depressed, and that depression causes a soul searching to say, what am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me? You see what I'm saying? This is how this works. And it also causes something else, which is a lethargic attitude towards putting out any more energy behind this plan. And so you're designed by nature to conserve energy. If you have evidence that something isn't working, then you should stop putting out energy behind it. And so one of the things that can happen, and did happen in the Stone Age, is that you would have put out less energy behind losing propositions. However, you had to keep putting out energy. So if we were looking for a place with food, and we had gone west and we had gone south and we'd gone east and we had failed, and we thought that the right thing to do is to not go north, because that's usually been a bad idea. But we're getting cornered into a situation where all other directions are not working. So we're not excited about the idea of going north, but we don't have a choice. And so what will happen is people in Stone Age environments had to put energy behind the best option, even though they weren't that wild about it. And they definitely needed a depression as a mechanism to tell them when they were disappointed in the feedback from a given a line of effort. And so this is, but in a modern environment, what can happen is we're so wealthy and we still have temperature controlled housing and a safe place to sleep, and we still have food in the refrigerator, even though we are being very ineffective in some area of our life and we're surprised by the ineffectiveness. What could then happen is the depression can cause all systems lack of effort. And as a result of that, people can be under-exercised. And when you are under-exercised, I believe that the natural neurochemical mechanisms are not actually where they're supposed to be, even under depression. So I think the depression is considerably exaggerated oftentimes in the modern environment, because the energy conservation mechanisms that naturally kick in with depression wind up including people not getting any exercise, which would have been impossible in the Stone Age. Even though you were depressed and you were conserving your energy and you were looking for a new alternative for successful action, you had to keep moving or else you were going to die. And so I recommend to people that if they're depressed and we don't have the problem solved yet, and you don't have expert help to try to help you figure out how it is that you're going to be more successful in that domain, the one thing that we want to do is essentially force yourself to get some exercise in, because that is going to probably be a contributing factor to having this depression worse than it is naturally going to be. Okay?
Right. All right. Thank you. Great. Dr. Lisle, in your book here, someone is asking, in your book, The Pleasure Trap, does it help anyone with drug addiction or just relate to food?
You know, it's really a more of a global discussion about the nature of addictive process. And so we're not taking this thing step by step through the sort of drug problems that people would have, but we're talking more globally about how it is that this comes about. and what the psychological processes are when it comes to addictive like processes. The pleasure trap is mostly centered on food as an issue. So it's about the problem that our problems in trying to correct our diets and getting our diets on a healthy track takes us down the kind of challenges that are consistent with drug addiction. And therefore, the book is mostly about that. But it's wider than that, sort of philosophically. But that's really the problem that it's specifically addressing.
All right, very good. Thank you. Thank you. Would you comment on a topic that I don't think we've touched it before, about how did the idea that we have to have breakfast and lunch and dinner at certain times come about? I mean, do we really need to do that, or just eat whenever we're hungry?
Yeah, we should be looking to just eat whenever we're hungry. There's really no need for us to look at this as anything other than an animal problem. We should be. I think it was years ago. It's probably 20 years ago or more that I read a book by Dr. Wayne Dyer. I think it was Pulling Your Own Strings or something like that. I don't think that's what it was. I think it was his third book, and he had a concept in there that I thought was very good. And the concept was, he said, first, be a good animal. And he meant, sleep when you're tired, and exercise to be fit, and eat when you're hungry, and don't eat more or eat less than what it is that you want. In other words, he was basically, in a very rough way, he was saying, follow your instincts. And he obviously didn't know much about nutrition or anything else as far as that goes. He was just sort of making an observation that people, to his eye as a psychologist, he was thinking, why are we regimenting things in a way? We should be following our instincts a little bit more than we are. And of course, that general insight it was a precursor to the pleasure trap. The pleasure trap is very much the story of that we have instincts that are sort of telling us what to do. However, the modern environment is setting those things askew. And it's actually disturbing the natural instinctual rhythms and decisions that human beings would naturally make. And so what we want to do is to try to move a little bit more towards some of these, try to essentially put our lives on a little more primitive basis with respect to food, for example, and with respect to exercise and with respect to sleep. And so we want to, and then be able to follow our instincts from there. So in principle, we would want to be getting as much sleep as you want, so that you wake up spontaneously and naturally and feeling refreshed, rather than waking up tired from an alarm. So that would be, that always seems, I can remember watching Alan Goldhammer, my partner, give that discussion and to groups, and he would say, hey, we're designed by nature, you should be waking spontaneously feeling refreshed. And people would just laugh. The concept of waking spontaneously feeling refreshed is absolutely alien and absurd. Like, there's no possible way that this could ever happen to these people.
Right.
And then we move on to that. And of course, we'd say, well, eat to satiety on whole natural foods. Well, people aren't eating whole natural foods, and they want to lose weight. And so they know, well, I can't eat to satiety, because if I eat to satiety on the food that I'm eating, that's why I'm 40 or 50 pounds overweight. So the solution then is to, quote, diet, for God's sakes. So, et cetera. So this is, I forget what your question was, but I was close to answering it somewhere in here. Should people be regimenting their food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner? No. So if it turns out that I ate a lot of food the night before, and I've got a lot of glycogen storage, and I didn't exercise that much yesterday, then I might not eat till noon or 1 o'clock the next day. I'm just simply not hungry. So I simply eat when I'm hungry, and I eat as much as I feel like, and I eat when it is that I feel like, and that's that. And that's rule number one: first, be a good animal.
Right. I started doing this a while back when I went to True North, and I heard more about this. And, there are days that I just don't feel like eating breakfast, and I'm perfectly fine. And there's really no reason for me to sit down and eat breakfast if I'm just not hungry. And so I can go until noon. There's nothing wrong. I won't, people think that maybe skipping a meal, you're going to die if you don't eat. I don't.
Not at all.
No, not at all.
Even close. We have people skip meals for 3 weeks. They'll go 21 days without eating at True North Health Center, and they almost always are getting better rather than worse at almost any problem that they have. So yes, it's there's no reason to be anxious about making sure that we eat on any particular schedule. The schedule should be there to serve you, not the other way around.
Right. I think another thing to remind people, because we all need reminders, and besides we have new people coming in every time, and some of our guests maybe haven't had the chance to read Dr. McDougall's masterpiece, The Starch Solution, and his new book here, The Healthiest Diet on the Planet, that oil is a highly processed substance.
Sure.
With no fiber, no water, very few nutrients, and so people sometimes get confused because we're bombarded by the media with coconut oil and olive oil and this oil. And I think I heard somebody, I cannot remember who it was, but recently said that the only miracle in coconut oil is that it's still on the shelf. Anyway, would you comment a little bit on this? We don't have to expand too much because, of course, this is all over Dr. McDougall's website and books, but if you would say a few words.
Sure. Oil is the #1 cause of excess weight that I observe in people. So this is how calories sneak in the side. Oil is so rich. It's the richest caloric resource for human beings that there is. Oil is 4,000 calories a pound. It's pure fat, so therefore it doesn't get any richer. That means there are more calories in this, the most possible calories in the smallest possible space. And more than anything else, your satiety mechanisms rely on essentially volume. How many calories do you have in what kind of space? So you're designed by nature to be reading the amount of proper food for you to be eating, more or less on what we're going to call volumetrics. This is all about sort of how much stretch reception there is in the system. What does the system estimate that the caloric intake that you just had is? And your hunger drive is more or less regulated by this. When you take an unnatural substance like oil that is exceedingly rich, you can slip in, if you think about this, a teaspoon of water is almost immaterial in terms of if you have literally a teaspoon of water, it impacts your hunger drive or thirst mechanisms almost not at all. It's almost immaterial to any sensation that you would have. But a teaspoon of oil is a substantial amount of calories. I don't know how many it is, about 50 or 60 calories. That's phenomenal. And so a tiniest little bit of oil will go essentially or very closely undetected by the system. And as a result, you can systematically overeat very, very easily. And so this is, many experiments have shown this. So Barbara Rawls at Penn State University for years has done these types of experiments. And I remember one experiment that was having young women that were eating as much pasta and vegetables as they wanted. And they had them in a couple of different groups. They added 300 calories of oil to one group's pasta and vegetable dishes. They ate just as much pasta and vegetables as the group without the oil, but they ate an additional, in other words, they ate until they were satisfied. They ate an additional 300 calories at that meal because it came in the form of a couple of tablespoons of oil. So the oil is so small and so compact and so slithery that people can absorb a substantial amount of extra calories and not even know it's happening. So the very first place that I ever look when someone is overweight and they're struggling and they think that they're doing a good job and they can't understand why they're having a problem, the first place I always look is oil. And that's the first thing that needs to come out.
Right. And what about people that say that they have a very dry skin? I mean, you wouldn't say that, you would take care of it externally rather than taking in oil, thinking that that's going to cause the skin, to not be dry. I mean, that's what some of the people are writing here in the chat.
Yes, I actually, it depends upon, it's possible some people get on, when they go this direction, they could have an extremely low-fat diet possibly, and you might want to do something to increase the fat content of your diet, but you would never use oil. So you'd want to use a good source of omega-3 acids, for example. So might use walnuts. You might take some flax seeds and grind them up and put them on your oatmeal in the morning. In other words, there's other ways to get those essential fatty acids than to use oil. Oil is in principle something that you would never use. It's something that you would never see in the Stone Age. And it turns out that, of course, people really like it because it is the most concentrated caloric resource that there is. So it's a supernormal stimulus that has, obviously addictive-like properties to it. And that's why it's such a fight for people to get out of it.
Right. Okay, let me just mention something because I think some people missed my my banner at the top here that they're saying, are we supposed to be discussing arthritis? No, I wrote it. Maybe some of you missed it. Dr. McDougall is not available today, and so we have Dr. Doug Lisle today as a guest, and we will do the arthritis webinar next week. Do you have any, Dr. Lisle, any experience with switching to a whole food plant-based diet and arthritis? Have you seen an improvement in people's conditions?
Oh yes, I've seen dramatic improvements. I've seen people with really great painful rheumatoid arthritis, for example, and 2 or 3 days into the 10-day program, suddenly they're out of pain. So these are things that are extraordinary. I'm not going to say this is going to happen 100% of the time, but I've seen it, and I've seen it often. So the suffering, obviously, arthritis is what we're talking about is inflammation of the joints. And so what we're trying to do is put a diet together that is very low in, inflammatory, products. And as a result of that, the McDougall diet is an outstanding way to go. And sometimes it's even useful to tweak it further. So there's other little details that we are getting worked out and that people have learned about that can actually have people even sometimes more successful than just the first order change. But the first order change is to get all the junk out of the diet, get to a healthy starch-centered diet, and very often we see rapid improvement in terms of that.
Right.
Yes.
Aside from what you were listing about not consuming oil, someone else is asking here, like aside from excess calories, what are other disadvantages of oil consumption?
Well, I'm not sure how well known the different, or excuse me, how well we understand the problems. So, for example, there's two things I would talk about. A lot of oil that people use they use it in frying. And so when we fry those oils are going to result in the formation of free radicals, which are essentially mistakes that are going to take place in the body, and it's going to contribute to the aging process, etc. So bad things happen when you heat oils like that. Now, if you're talking about eating oils cold, pouring olive oil on your salad, for example, what would really be wrong with that other than the fact that it's fatty and it doesn't have good things about it? There's evidence that suggests, for example, that this is problematic for cardiovascular health, and that this is a problem, that this is going to contribute to vascular injury. So there's plenty of reason to stay out of these products, and so people shouldn't look at these things as a healthy little side benefit that we're going to add to our diet. You should look at them for what they are. They are a highly processed, totally unnatural, supernormal stimulus that is highly concentrated and keeps excess weight on people, and is associated with cardiovascular damage, as well as as when they're heated, they're associated with very significant system-wide problems as well. So yes, oils are, there's just nothing about this. There's no place that we can move the camera and call these things a health food or health supporting or even health neutral, because they're not.
Right, right. Dr. Lisle, sometimes your microphone is touching and it's making noise.
Oh,
that's okay.
That's no good.
You might want to hold it, or
yeah, okay, that's good.
make sure it's not hitting. So one person was asking, what would you say to someone that wants to exercise, but they're constantly in pain? Are there any types of exercises that someone can start in a gradual way until they stop, the oil consumption and other things that may be irritating their...
I'm really not sure. Maybe we're talking about somebody with arthritis. That's probably who's asking that question.
I am not sure.
Yes. And so, I'm not sure what I would tell that person. That sounds like a fairly highly specific question.
Right.
And that they need to get some expert advice about what pain that they should be braving their way through, with respect to what sort of exercise program and what pain they should be respecting that message and keeping away from. So this is where the individual analysis would be necessary.
Right. Okay. Could you, someone is saying here, would you just say a few words about binge eating?
Yes. Binge eating is mostly the result of, there's going to be different patterns depending upon what kind of person we're talking about and what we're looking at. But essentially, the number one cause of binge eating is going to be the really rich processed foods. And so what we're going to see is the following, that very rich processed foods are going to, your mind recognizes that these things are really valuable. So in your ability to detect calorie density is extraordinary. For example, an apple that is not ripe may have one less calorie in that bite of apple than a similar apple that is ripe. So it might be the difference between 9 calories in your mouth and 10 calories in your mouth is the difference between not liking the taste of it and spitting it out versus consuming it. Literally 1 calorie can be the difference. Now, if you realize that a chocolate apple, that same bite out of a chocolate apple would be 100 calories. So realize that the Stone Age brain and its wisdom says, don't eat that apple because there's only 9 calories in that bite of apple. And it says, ooh, there's 10 calories in this apple, it's ripe. Go ahead and eat this apple and we're going to motivate you to eat that apple. You can imagine the motivational signal that takes place when it's 100 calories in the mouth, behind a food stuff that is 10 times as concentrated as the apple. And chocolate is about 10 times as concentrated as fruit. So we can see that this is a supernormal signal that should put off shock waves throughout the system that would tell the system to absolutely gorge on whatever this material is, because it's super valuable in terms of our survival, because we were designed by nature to be defending against the number one survival threat for human beings or other animals is starvation. And so as a result, you are highly attuned to the calorie density in foods, and you are very excited when you run into foods that are of higher calorie density. And now what we've done with the modern food supply is we basically made every food, essentially all foods, other than the whole natural foods, which are a very small percentage of human consumption. Essentially all foods are super normal. They are highly concentrated, very efficient vectors for getting high amounts of calories into people. Now, so what is binge eating? Binge eating is when you get into particularly rich food and your nervous system says, well, we know what this is. This is super valuable for our survival. And not only that, I believe that your mind has more sophisticated algorithms than that. I think it knows intuitively that other people in the village are going to be out to get this food. So, if there's a piece of pie, just think of this in your own house. If you have half a dozen people living in your house, if you have some piece of pie out there for dessert, and it doesn't get finished because people cram themselves full, but then there's some left over, you come back out 2 or 3 hours later and you see if it's there. You've gone up to play a little video game or watch a little TV or talk to your Aunt Susie, and you come back down an hour and a half later and the kids have got it all. It's gone. Okay. So we know intuitively, no, they didn't go in and raid the carrot sticks. That's not what happened. Okay, so do we think that human beings would know this intuitively? Of course we would know this intuitively. So as a result, I believe that there's an urgency when there's very rich food around to eat it, and eat it fast, and go ahead and eat well past your satiety mechanisms. So satiety mechanisms would be where your stomach might be naturally about 80% full typically. But when there's rich food, you've got extra room in there and you can cram some more in if you have to. And that's exactly what that extra space is for. In the unlikely event that we have run into some really rich food in the Stone Age, go ahead and cram it in, and cram it in quickly and vigorously before the other people in the village get more than their share. And so this is binge eating. And if we add to this another behavior pattern, which can be really exacerbate this, which is the people trying to lose weight by restricting their food intake and being hungry for long stretches of time, thinking that they are earning their way to lower weight by that strategy, then you can see how people are going to get set up. They're going to be very hungry, they're going to be very impulsive, and if they get around rich food, they're going to eat rich food very aggressively. And they're going to eat it right up to the gills. And so this is the binge eating pattern. So the solution for binge eating is, number one, greater understanding of how weight and weight loss and weight maintenance actually occur, to understand the mathematics and understand the biological process, and understand that what we need to be doing is we need to be eating a low density, very starch centered diet, eating to satiety, and that's something that we can trust. And so if people will do that and they don't go through long stretches of being hungry in order to, quote, be good and lose weight, when they do that, they are setting themselves up for a voracious binge. And it's always going to be on very rich foods. I suppose that there might be 1 in 10,000 people that would binge on carrots and steamed kale, but I have not met that person. Okay. Whenever I've talked to a binger, it's been someone who is getting into something very rich, and they're getting into it oftentimes after a period of several hours of restriction because they're frustrated and they're trying to lose weight. And so this sets up a pattern that's very sort of a self-reinforcing miniature nightmare. Right. And so the way out is to do what we're talking about.
All right, Dr. Lisle, I think we can fit in one more question, and we'll have to close for today, but we will have you back next month if you are willing to.
Sure.
So Dr. Lisle, there's a medical student here who's asking, you always say we should tell people who ask about our way of eating that we're just trying something out. However, I am wondering, do you have any advice on addressing this issue truly in conversation without offending the other person? This is a true quest for me as a medical student.
Let's see if you have any advice on addressing this question truly in conversation.
Right, rather than just saying, well, I'm just trying something out. I mean, how can you not be aggressive and, preaching and trying to, I think yesterday you were talking about being able to tell the difference between someone who is truly interested,
right,
and someone who doesn't really care and want to see what you say.
Sure, I think the same principles are involved here. And when I discuss this, I talk very much about that we have to be careful about what I call the esteem dynamic. And so we have to be careful that the other person is essentially in a less than position and we're in a more than position in terms of our knowledge. And so we want to make sure that we don't signal this in a way where we are looking down or we're making a pronouncement that is going to set up a sort of police monitor, I'm right, you're wrong, I'll observing you in the future, and I'll be seeing what it is that you do, dynamic between two people. That's a problem. So instead, what we want to do is we want to signal that our confidence in the knowledge is somewhat tentative. And so if we do this, this takes a lot of pressure off the situation. So if I was a medical student and I knew a lot of these things and people were asking me, I would say, well, these are some good ideas. And I'm not sure that we know everything yet. But this appears to be a good direction with a lot of promise. And if we say it in that way, they do not feel like they are locked into a situation where anything that you observe them do that you are going to be frowning on, or that you know it's wrong and you told them. No, these are good ideas. We're not sure we have all the answers, but we think a lot of these ideas are promising and they're probably worth looking into. And that's how I would talk about the situation. And if they ask, well, what do you mean? You say, well, it looks like probably a good idea is to go towards a more plant-based lifestyle. We're not sure as to what degree that should be, whether it should be 100% or 90% or 80%. But it looks like that's a very good direction, and that's a direction that I'm going. And it seems to be doing well. And I think there's a lot of promise in these ideas.
Maybe that would be a good point to direct them to a third party instead of you telling them, give them the name of a book or tell them to go visit Dr. McDougall's website, right?
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. So that's about the time when we say, here's some resources that I've looked at that I was impressed by, and you can see what you think. But I always keep the little hook in there that I'm not sure that, we don't know everything. And if we keep that in there, it really keeps the tone of that conversation to way out. It keeps us away from the preaching situation,
right?
And it really protects those relationships.
And I think you can tell. I mean, if the conversation keeps developing and the person, you can tell that they honestly want to know. Maybe you want to share something more, but what you're saying is worked for me. And just send, tell them that all this information is out there for free. They can get it.
Absolutely. You bet.
All right. Well, I wanted to mention one more thing because I think last week Dr. McDougall was saying that this book, of course, this is the latest book that he and his wife Mary wrote, and it is full of, in the middle, you have the color picture book, and it's just wonderful. And it's on Amazon and it's on Dr. McDougall's website. And I think that this would make a great Christmas present. So perhaps while you're ordering, this would go well with it. So that's how you talk to people, by giving them the book, and then they will come back with some questions, and then you can invite them to these weekly webinars. And I think that's a great way, because then they don't see themselves as having to do the job of preaching and teaching. They can do what you did, which is, you sent them to a webinar, or you sent them to a website, or you gave them a book, and that's easy to do, right?
You bet. Absolutely.
Well, Dr. Lisle, thank you again for being here today on a short notice. And next week, I will be back on Thursday with the one and only Dr. McDougall to talk about arthritis. And I think the following week is about kidney health, but I'm not sure. But it's already posted on Dr. McDougall's website. And I hope to see you all then. And happy holidays, Dr. Lisle.
Absolutely. And to everybody.
In a few weeks.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Gustavo.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.